and we are really excited that y'all have come to join us tonight. Before I introduce you to our presenter, I just wanted to share a little bit about the Florida Women Landowners for those who might not be aware or joining for the first time tonight. We're a 501c3 that was founded about 3 years ago, and what our mission is to provide expert knowledge, resources to the women who are in Florida that are landowners. We want to help them reach their goals and their management goals. It can be a little overwhelming when you maybe inherit property from your family, when you end up with something and you want it to be picture perfect. So we are here to provide you the resources that you need to get it there. Now, we host 4 in-person events across the state of Florida, one a quarter, and that's to provide hands-on learning for the women. We've done things like Wild Things, which was habitat improvement for wild birds, wild native plants, and eradication of wild invasive species. Another, which was one of my favorite, was Learn to Burn, which we went up in the Panhandle and had 46 women who were on the ground learning to do prescribed burns. We broke up into smaller groups. We had about groups of about 6. And each of those groups ended up burning 14 acres. So we were very excited. We learned so much, and we were feeling pretty empowered at the end of the day. On the months that we don't have an in-person event, we host events like tonight. We bring experts in their fields to answer questions you might have, from legacy planning to conservation easement 101 and all of the how-tos. So I would like to ask you to join our mission. Our website is really simple to find. It is fwla.net. Florida Women Landowners, but it's fwla.net. There, for just $35 a year, you can become a member. You can meet and network with an incredible group of women and financiers to turn all of your land dreams into reality. And it's a lot of fun. So now I'd like to introduce to you Michele Curtis. Michele Curtis has been practicing forestry since she graduated from the University of Florida with the BS in Florida Resources and Conservation in 1978. Michele held many roles during her 35-year career with Procter & Gamble Buckeye. Early in her career, she helped develop the wood supply for Buckeye Pulp Mill that was being built in 1984 in Oglethorpe, Georgia. After that assignment, she and her husband, Don Curtis, also a forester, transferred to Perry, Florida, where she was responsible for all of the operations in the management of 423,000 acres of industrial timberland in North Florida. The duties included forest fire suppression and prescribed burning, harvest scheduling, road maintenance, logging, site prep, tree planting, and management of foresters and union organized technicians. As the wood supply procurement manager, Michele was responsible for purchasing 3 million tons of wood and wood fuel per year for the Perry, Florida pulp mill. Upon her retirement from Buckeye in 2014, Michele joined her husband Don Curtis's firm, the Forestry Company. Now her energies have been focused on evaluating forests, developing forest management plans, appraising timberland, developing timber harvest plans, managing timber bid sales, managing site prep and for reforestation. And she managed the Pinellas County 12,000 acres Pasco Water Well Field, which has cattle ranching, wildlife habitat, and forestry. To say that she has done it all is an understatement. Michele has served on the board of directors for the Florida Forestry Association and the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, an international organization responsible for developing sustainable forest certification standards for landowners and wood-consuming industries. She's currently on the board of directors for the Frank Norris Foundation Timber Mark South Timber Stumpage Reporting Service. She'll tell us more about that. We are so lucky tonight to have Michele with us. So Michele, we'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you so much. I appreciate the opportunity to share this information with you. As I was looking over the list of people who had signed up, I saw some people I knew, some people I didn't, and one person I actually went to college with but hadn't talked to in 45 years. So there's a lot of people that are on tonight that have their own land, and hopefully you'll be able to ask questions or say, here's how we do it at where I work or where on my farm. So feel free at any time to stop me and ask questions, but I'll try to talk about forestry markets and future forest considerations. Okay, so I'll move on to slide 2. So we'll be talking about the wood industry supply and demand and reflections on that, because that's what really drives the business side of forestry. And most of us, including myself and my husband, we didn't inherit land necessarily. We bought it and had to make and pay the payments. You know, and so you've got to be able to make and generate income off of your land to be able to buy it. And certainly if you're fortunate enough that your family owned land, you have to be able to generate enough income to pay the taxes and pay for the management fees so that you can continue to enjoy the fruits of what the land does for you. So we'll talk about markets, and also with the consideration of the markets, talk what we might want to do slightly differently, maybe in forest management considerations. But you stop me at any time as we go through if you got questions, okay? So first thing around supply and demand in the wood products industry, pine and hardwood pulpwood, chip and saw timber markets mimic conventional supply and demand. And so those are the kind of products that in the wood area you might be harvesting on your property. Pulpwood, most people know what that is. Some may not know what chip and saw is, but it's the middle size wood that they make 2x4s out of at the lumber mills. And saw timber, of course, is the bigger wood that they make the bigger dimension lumber with. So the way the markets work is when it comes to your land and your timber, it's really local markets. What's happening regionally and nationally may or may not really trickle down to where you live, because it all is really impacted at your level of what markets are in your region where you actually can sell your wood to. So the way it works is simple supply and demand. If there's more wood available than the markets need, then prices fall. If there's not enough wood available to supply the local markets, prices rise. So a landowner, what we try to do as individuals anyway, and help our clients, is we take advantage of the weather, because weather can cause there to be a shortage of wood at the markets. And if you have timber and land that can be harvested at any time, even during a hurricane, and can be, hauled out of the forest, because they're a good road network coming to your land, or paved roads coming to your land, and you're not having to go through swamps and this and that, you probably can log your wood anytime. So when it's wet out there in the woods, that might be a time you put your timber up for sale, because it will bring a premium, because other blocks are not can't be harvested at that time. So when it comes to harvesting your particular wood, local markets is where you're really going to determine if the prices are up or prices are down. Something's going on in North Georgia really is not going to impact you at all. Okay. On the other hand, when it comes to the manufacturers, they play in a global market. So the pulp mills and anybody that uses pulpwood type material typically is playing in a worldwide market, whether it would be pellets or pulpwood or sawmills and that kind of thing. They ship internationally, particularly the pulp mills, and some of the saw timber as well goes internationally, but a lot of it is used domestically. So what happens there on the wood market internationally is, if there's more pulp available around the world than is needed by global manufacturers that use pulp as their raw material, the prices are going to fall. And if they keep falling because there's more pulp keep coming on the market from other countries, then sometimes the mills will take downtime, or they may even shut the higher cost pulp manufacturing plants down permanently. And that's what we experienced in the community that I live in. I live in Taylor County, which is Perry. I live about 12 miles out of town. But the pulp manufacturer that had been here for 70 years was always profitable. But when Georgia Pacific made a decision to shut it down because it didn't play into what their needs were at the time. And so a lot of times what happens is manufacturing companies will shut an operation down because it's higher cost operation than they have at some of their other locations, and they shift the production and just grow the productive capacity at one of their other existing mills. So that's how global markets really play into our local markets and what happens there. So anyway, those, again, I really wanted to point out that when you're selling your wood, you're selling it locally. When the pulp manufacturers and the sawmills are doing their thing, they're dealing with a global market. And that's what drives what they're facing. And I'll be talking some about that. So this slide I'm sharing with you now was developed by Florist Consulting Firm, and they shared it at the Florida Forestry Association annual meeting here just a couple of months ago. And it is such an important slide. It really sums it up. On the map, you see the red circles. Those are representing mills that have shut down. The green circles are representing facilities that are growing their capacity. So I'm going to point out where I'm located is right here. I don't know if you can see the arrow on your screen, but I'm in this region of Florida, in the Panhandle, right at the bend of the state, the Big Bend. And we had a large wood facility shut down using 3 million tons a year. And then recently, Georgia Pacific announced another shutdown here in Cedar Springs, Georgia. And then, of course, here's Panama City mill that shut down a few years back. And then within the last couple of months, 2 more mills were announced closures here in Georgia. And so when those mills go down, for at least for a temporary period of time, and temporary might be several years, there's going to be a major shift in demand for wood in those regions. The beauty is when you've got the wood available, other people around the world start poking around and go, oh, that mill shut down. Let me see. Am I interested in building a facility there? Because the wood's certainly there. The loggers are there. The landowners are growing timber. So they know that there's a wood basket that's not tapped out. And so we are confident that over time, new wood industry will come in where the big shutdowns have occurred, but it does take time. And the key points that Forrest made on this slide was since the start of 2020, North America's forest industry has contracted by 30 million tons a year. That's huge. I'm going to put it in perspective. The mill I worked at used about 3 million tons a year. That was 550 semi-loads of wood a day. So that's 10 times that capacity that has shut down permanently in North America. And North America includes Canada, okay? So what we've seen is a contraction of the industry. It's not that the wood went away. It's that the industries on that worldwide market that use wood, the industries that use wood products like pulp, found wood that better met their needs, and usually that meant cheaper. So let me go to the next slide and help you understand what happened. And again, this is Forest Consulting slide that they shared at the Forestry Association meeting, and extremely, extremely competent consulting firm. If anyone ever needs help, I've used them in the past. They're fabulous, and they know what they're doing. But what their slide showed was North America, since 1994, lost 32% of their wood pulp production market. So it went down 32% since 1994. Well, what did the world quit using that wood? No, they didn't. So who came in to pick it up? Asia and South America. Asia, their production went up 175%, in South America 300%. So what you're seeing in a world market is the production of pulp using pine pulpwood basically shifted to Asia and South America. And years ago, my husband and I made a trip to South America and looked at some of the things that were going on, and their industry was starting to grow. They were, you know, establishing plantations and things like that. And now over time, they have grown their industry, and they built pulp mills in South America and in Asia that now have taken our capacity out of the market. So that was so enlightening to me. And Amanda Lang, the president of Forest Consulting, shared this information, and just wanted to pass that on to you. So how does that really relate to you? And first, you have to say, well, first, where is your timberland located? And what are your goals for your timberland? And then as a result of all this new information, how might you want to manage your timberland going forward? So everything boils down to the localized piece of it. And so I'll just say for hypothetical, there are several mills here, pulp mills here on the east coast of Florida that are still operating and doing fine. There's pulp mills here in South Georgia that are still operating, doing fine. So you're still here, got plenty of markets there. So if your wood is over here, you have a very vibrant pulp market still. If you're in my area, you still have pulp market. It's just not as vibrant. And so therefore there's not as much competition for your wood when you do choose to have a timber sale. My husband and I, we still plant trees today on our land because we believe that markets will return, that we're planning for the harvest in 20 years. So who knows what markets will be here, but there are some that are developing. And one I'll share with you, which is really an encouragement to us. There's a new developing industry called biochar. And as I think back, I remember when the pellet industry started, and we thought, burning, grinding up wood and making pellets, that's not going to last. And they're shipping it over to Europe. Well, you know what? They've been in business a long time now, and they're growing. They're huge. So what do I know? So what I'm saying is these new industries that are emerging will come right on in and take the place of the pulp mills that are closing down. It just takes a few years. But there's one that has been announced, and it's been announced for Cross City, which is right here, outside of this red circle that shows that where the pulp mill shut down. And they are making a biochar, which is like a charcoal that is made in a gasification technology that will take the place of the use of coal in the steel industry. So, there is worldwide demand for that product, and the people who are building the facility have, they have markets for a number of other operations, and they plan to continue to grow their business as soon as they get this one up and running. So I see, the pellet industry is going to continue to grow. It is still growing today. The biochar market's a new market coming in that will continue to grow because there's a lot of demand for it. And of course, for pulp type material, there's oriented strand board mill, which is the chipped wood plywood replacement. So it looks like a piece of plywood, but it's glued together with a lot of chips. And there's a lot of industries that have the potential to grow to take the place of these pulp mills that are shutting down. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's a short-term hit on markets, but it's not, the industry's not over. But we want to aggressively try to bring in the business to Florida so that we have vibrant markets going forward.
Michelle, we have a quick question. Lori
Okay.
has asked us if a landowner can sell the wood directly to the market, or if they need to go through a broker or a land manager as a middleman.
You can sell directly to the market, but I want to caution you. If you don't understand the market, you can sell your wood for a lot less than you could get for it sometimes if you do understand what's going on in the market. So yes, you can sell directly to loggers, and they're good people. They're not trying to cheat you or anything like that. But when you come to business, you want to get as much as you can for your timber, and they want to pay as little as they have to for your timber. So that's just business. And so in my opinion, it's wise to get advice. And we find that when we put wood up for sale, we typically have bid sales where we get multiple buyers, because one fella, I mean, we like all of them. All the loggers are great, but somebody might not need wood very much that's bidding on your property or on your timber, and somebody else maybe needs it really, really bad. And so you won't know that if you just sell it directly to one logger. And so we typically, when we sell our timber, offer it to a number of loggers at the same time. Did that answer your question?
The next question Laurier had was, what is the standard percentage of sales that the broker charges? Is that usually how they do it?
I don't know what I can't say what others charge. I really don't know. But the thing that you got to understand is it actually takes a lot of time to sell a piece of property and manage the logging for you. And here's the thing. When you're dealing with people harvesting your wood and taking it off of your property, you may have loggers in their employees, and you may have contract truckers that haul for them, and they have a lot of markets they haul to. And sometimes people get confused and lose a ticket or this or that. We, as many consultants do, have a security system where we track the loads to make sure that the landowner gets paid for all the loads. It's not that someone's trying to cheat you, not at all, but it does happen that tickets get lost. Okay, I'll just put it that way. And so we encourage you to get some help. Okay. Anything else? So, but I don't know what others charge, and I don't think it's probably appropriate for me to share what we charge, but you feel free to give me a call. I'd be glad to talk with whoever has that question individually, but probably not on the airwaves. Okay. Okay. We ready to move on? Okay. Okay. So as you consider where your timberland is, that helps you know, one consideration. And what I want to say, this is one of these, disclaimers. All the examples I'm sharing with you are hypothetical. Your land may not fit any of these. So please don't use these examples about, it's to say, oh, this is what I need to do, because your land is different than everybody else's. It may have something unique and special. It may be, have some special outstanding water body that has to be cared for, very carefully, and using the best management practices differently than a normal best management practice requirements are. So get a help from a forester regarding your specific situation, because these examples may not fit your particular land site, but we'll just give you some examples to think about. Okay. So in the first scenario, this scenario is one where we have 100 acres of 15-year-old slash pine timber, and current density is about 450 trees per acre. And there are markets for pine pulp within about 60 miles of our land. And we want to thin the timber to generate some income now. And we want to grow chip and saw timber, which are higher value products, and for the future. And my husband and I, these are examples that, in this case, fit us. We don't anticipate clear cutting the residual stand of timber while we're still alive. We want to focus on improving it for wildlife habitat. We want to direct prescribed burning, and we want to, improve the habitat for hunting deer, turkey, and quail. And so we want to keep the land in timber by growing chip and saw timber and leave it to our children. So there's some of our parcels fit this bill. And so in this example, this is what we would recommend. So your trees are 15, so you might want to sell a timber thinning and leave a residual stand of timber of 40 to 60 square feet of basal area per acre. And you go, okay, what does that mean? Okay, so I drew some little dots on the screen to show you. Basically, it means currently in this particular scenario, the trees are averaging 6 inches in diameter. There's about 402 trees an acre. We have a simulating software packages that we use that based on history and based on research that's been done by the universities, you can predict how many trees are going to be there at whatever age based on the site quality of the land. So in this case, the Sims report showed that, we probably have about 45 tons an acre and that would be about an 80 basal area in this case. So if you wanted to cut it back to 40 to 60 basal area, you'd cut about a third to a half of the trees to get to your target basal area. What that does, it allows the trees that remain to have less competition for the food and water. And therefore they get more of that food and water to put on more diameter and height growth. So they turn into chip and saw timber trees, which are more valuable. It also opens it up where you can ride your ATVs through it, you can hunt, and by doing the thinning, you're knocking a lot of the underbrush down where you can start your burning regime. And now you can start doing control burning under the stand and be able to manage for your wildlife as well. So, that's the kind of thing that you could still grow timber, but you can thin it out to actually promote your wildlife. And a lot of times the Game Commission, FWC, will want to target 30 basal area. So they cut it even less trees per acre. And if you want to make it look like a park or something like that, which we love, we do love that, then you can take out more trees. But if you take out to about 40 to 60 basal area, you'll continue to grow a lot of volume on your property and make more money for your income down the road. So you can cut it lower than that to do even more wildlife kinds of management. But this is sort of a middle of the road kind of thing. So any questions on this as a possible regime or comments? Okay, so we'll move on to the next hypothetical. Now, this is one, people, if you're just inheriting land, you may never have seen how they actually harvest timber. And this machine is called a feller buncher. And this would show you, like if we were thinning this stand, in this case, we were clear cutting this track, but if we were thinning the stand, we might take out every 4th row and then selectively cut the trees that didn't make very good quality trees today that would never make a chip and saw tree. We go ahead and cut those out too. And so I'll turn the video on in a second where you see how it works. But what a feller buncher does is it actually cuts the tree with a pair of shears, like a pair of scissors here at the bottom, and it grabs it with these arms at the top, and it will actually be able to drive along and cut 4 or 5 trees in a bundle and then lay them down. See how these trees are all laid down in a bunch? You'll lay them down where the skidder can come pick it up and drag it to the ramp. But this is a feller buncher, and this is how you thin the timber. So I'm just going to turn the video on and let you take a look at it for a minute. Okay, so that gave you a feel for how that really works when you get your timber harvested.
So Michelle, we have 2 questions.
Okay.
One question is why you wouldn't start with initial planting of less trees per acre instead of basically waiting for that thin. And then
Okay.
is it from Allison asking about the size of wood that's taken for biochar.
Okay, the biochar question is really easy. Any size of wood can be taken for biochar up to 24 inches. So you might have some, what we call a wolf tree that's all not good form at all for saw timber, and you can take it for biochar. But pulpwood trees are, anything, usually there's a minimum diameter. Usually it's about 4 inches at breast height, would be a minimum diameter, or 4 inches at the butt maybe of the tree, up to 24 inches you could take for biochar. But so that took care of that one. And the other one, why wouldn't you start out with lower density? In one of the scenarios coming forward, I'll put that one out there. And that may be like if you are concerned that you won't have a market to thin the wood, you might start with a lower density planting now, and a lot of people are moving toward that, to just try to get more chip and saw trees earlier. And if you have very good stock as far as the seedlings you're planting, if they're genetically bred and improved, where they have good straightness and don't have disease and things like that, that may be something you want to do. But usually there's a mix of quality in the seedlings you get. And some of them will never make chip and saw because they don't meet all of the standards for chip and saw tree. They may have too much what they call sweep, like it's a curvy shape. It's not a straight tree, or it maybe has, a disease that would cause it to break off too early in its rotation. Fusiform rust, the trees will snap in a windstorm kind of thing. So, in fact, I'll back up to that original slide, and I'll point one out. See this tree right here at the bottom? Let me see if I can get away from that. Hold on. Back it up.
It's a small little stump.
Yeah, it looks like a small little stump, but that was probably, I can't tell for sure with this screen thing over it, but probably is a piece of fusiform. And you notice that tree is also forked. Forked tree will never make a chip and saw or saw timber tree. So you're going to get trees in your stand that don't have the quality and never will make it. Like this little one here, that's probably, it's not going to make it. It may die, just sort of a runt. This one's got the fork, and it's got disease. So it's important to get good quality seedlings that don't have the fusiform rust and things like that, because the trees will break off. And so if you see forked trees, that, and trees with the, I don't see a lot of sweep in some of these trees, so can't point one of those out. But depending on the quality of your stand, they'll take out anything when they're thinning it that won't ever make a chip and saw tree. So they'll get all this little stuff out of there.
And then, Michelle, I missed the second part of Allison's question when I read it out. Where does the biochar fall in the price between like pulp and saw timber?
Okay. The way things normally work is saw timber is the highest price because it's the highest value in product. Chip and saw is the next highest price because it's the next highest valued product. And then pulpwood, and in the pulpwood category is pellets, pulp for pulp mills, and biochar, sort of all in the same basket. So that's sort of the way the pricing is set up. And it's all market driven. If somebody's really short on wood and their pulp mill's about to run out of wood, they will pay a lot more for it because it's very expensive to run out of wood for a manufacturing plant. So on rare occasion, when it's really, really wet, the pulp mills often will pay more, and chip and saw timber will too, but normally their prices are high enough to be able to draw the wood to the sawmills. So did that answer your questions? Okay. All right. So as you control burn, there's a lot of different ways you can control burn. Most of the time people are using drip torches, as in the left picture. And this happened to be a 3,000 acre burn. And we used a helicopter, and Forestry Company used a helicopter for that burn. And it was a habitat burn for the state on a bare, an area there where just trying to improve their habitat on. But this is what a drip torch looks like, and you walk along and you establish a black line so where you're backfiring so that you can make your fire lines basically bigger to protect any of your surrounding timber or housing or whatever, so that you don't have a fire jump in the line. The picture on the right is where you're using a torch that actually shoots fire. You know, he's got a burn tank here on the front. This is Don Curtis, my husband. We've got a fire, a tank on the front, and can drive through and put fire where it needs to be quickly. And this is extremely, extremely helpful. You know, if you have an area where you just need to address something quickly, you can get there quickly and you can get that fire strung quick. So we use both, but and so you don't have to have an ATV to do it. You can do everything with a drip torch, as you see here, usually. Okay. So let's our hypothetical track number 2. This one assumes that we have 75 acres of land that's been site prepared, so it's already been prepared to accept planting. And in this case, our goal would be to manage our land to produce pine straw and make pine pulpwood and pine chip and saw, and produce income to help pay for our newborn son's college. So, you know, my husband and I did this for our boys, and it wasn't when they were brand new born, but we managed some property and some timber, and we bought it and we paid for it like we did a car payment. But by the time they were in college, we were able to sell the timber and the land to generate income to put them through college. And so this is sort of a scenario if we were to do that. And the action plan on it would be to apply the appropriate herbicide to control the competing vegetation. And those of you who are really just getting into forestry or maybe inheriting land, this is extremely, extremely important to get a competent, qualified, certified applicator to apply herbicide that meets the needs. Glyphosate most of the time is not the herbicide at time of planting that you would use. So don't assume it's some friend of yours that says, yeah, I'll come spray Roundup. I do it all the time. You know, yeah, that's probably not what you need when you're getting ready to plant your longleaf pine. So it's all dependent on soil. It's dependent on the type of competing vegetation that you're trying to control, and that kind of thing. One thing that the research has shown, and the universities have done a tremendous amount of research on this over time, is that if you don't keep the hardwood under control, you won't grow a stand of pine. Because if there's hardwood there, it will take over and it will kill the production on your pine. It'll take all the water and the nutrients out of the soil that you want for your pine, and it'll put it to that hardwood, and you will not have much of a crop left. So it is very important, if you're trying to grow pines to generate income, that you control the vegetation at the time of planting, and it lasts all the way through your rotation. Even though you still have hardwoods that may come up later and other vegetation, it's a significant help to apply the appropriate herbicide at time of prior to time of planting. And you can't just think that, oh, I'm going to call the guy a month before I want the trees in the ground. No, you have to do this months ahead, because there's a wait time after you apply herbicide prior to being able to plant the trees. Otherwise, the trees will be impacted by that herbicide. So you don't wait to the last minute. You're really planning a year in advance. So when you're harvesting the trees, you ought to be contacting someone to help you with a reforestation plan that includes the appropriate timing on every piece of the management. Because it's too late when we sometimes get people call us, they maybe signed up for cost share money, and they call us, oh, I got the cost share money. Can you help me get these trees in the ground? Oh, I'm sorry. I mean, they missed all the windows to do everything. It'll take another year, and they will have missed the opportunity on the money. So if you're going to do any kind of reforestation, you need to be working a year in advance with the people that can help you get it done. because it's quite a lengthy process to clean up your land and appropriate herbicide placed out there and get the seedlings ordered, because if you don't order them in time, they can be all gone before you get them ordered. And they typically, the nurseries start planting their nurseries to grow the trees for you. They start planting usually in April. And by the summer, by July, orders are being placed for those trees, and that would be planted the following January. So it is a year-long process, and just don't wait. In this case, in this scenario, if wanting to plant pine land timber for pine straw, you really need to plant longleaf pine, and it's containerized seedlings that you would plant, and at a density of about 600 to 700 trees per acre. And do not fertilize your longleaf pines. Other pines benefit from the fertilizer, longleaf don't. And what we've seen is the trees put on so much height growth so quickly that they literally like flop over because they don't have enough roots to hold them up. And they're, so it will happen. So don't apply any fertilizer to the longleaf pines. And they grow very, very well on sandy soils. And the reason I say that we say longleaf pine is the market has changed over time, that landowners are getting much more dollars per acre or dollars per bale for pine straw raked from longleaf, to the point they're not even raking slash pine anymore. They won't even come and rake your slash pine. And loblolly never has had a market for pine straw. So nowadays, the only thing that's going to generate income for you if you want a pine straw is longleaf pine. And so around age 7, glyphosate should be applied under the pines to prepare for the raking of straw. But you got to be careful not to get the spray on the live needles, because your needles are first of all, what's capturing the light and making the food for the tree. You don't want to kill those. The ones that fall on the ground are shed naturally. So you don't want to be spraying the food source that's bringing in food for your tree and helping it grow, but you want to spray it below the needles to kill the competing vegetation. And you'll have to mow in between the rows as well. And again, get somebody that knows what they're doing so you don't tear your trees up and things of that sort. But that's when glyphosate is used in pine rotations. The other thing is, and in other presentations that the women landowners will have for you, and already had some, would be dealing with some of the invasive species. Glyphosate is used to control some of the invasive species as well. So there is a place for it in glyphosate with Roundup, but it's not at time of planting. But if you're going to do pine straw, that's when you would use the glyphosate under your pines. And also, you want to be sure you don't just say, oh, well, I put it on my land when I planted, and use the same stuff, because it will, if you put it on growing trees, what you used at the time prior to planting, you might kill your trees. So be sure you're getting an expert that really knows what they're doing when it comes to applying herbicide.
So Michelle, we do have 2 questions.
Yes.
One is asking about opportunities for an organic pinewood forest, one that doesn't use herbicides, or even like opportunities where there's silvopasture with pine trees and cows.
Right. Certainly you can choose not to use a herbicide. That's been done for many, many years. Prior to the research that's been done by all the universities, the benefits of herbicide or not. What happens if you choose not to use the herbicides, know that you will get all the hardwood sprouts that want to come in will come, and they will crowd out and kill and use all the food and water that your pines would like to use, and and the pines will not do well, and a lot of them will die. So it's really a choice. You can say, oh, I'm going to do it all natural. You can, but just know you won't be producing the maximum production off your property to generate income to pay your bills. if that is not an important thing to you and it's more important to do everything organically and apply no chemicals of any sort, then that's certainly a choice you have. But just know that there's a trade-off. And the other thing I would say when it comes to herbicide use, you don't use it very much at all, truly, as compared to any other kind of agriculture. If you're not doing pine straw, the only time you're applying herbicide is before you plant, and that's every 25 years, 23 years. So it's not like you're over applying chemicals to your property, in my opinion, but that's my opinion. So you certainly can do what you want to do, but you will sacrifice the pine growth. And I'm sure there are other people on the line that have all the facts and figures, because I know I saw a number of university folks signed on that probably doing all the research on this. So I'd encourage people to chime in if you'd like to address some of those questions as well.
And I would suggest too, that if you're not in that pine straw market, that you then eventually get to prescribed fire, and that would help control your hardwoods.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. If you really don't want to focus on, but so that's a good point though. If you want to sell your pine straw, you cannot burn, because they will not take it if it has any char. So if you choose to burn, that's wonderful. You can control it all with fire. Okay. But you will not be able to sell pine straw.
Yeah. And then the other questions we have, Michelle, is about markets for hardwood, maybe some biomass harvest or hardwood harvest.
Yeah. Well, hardwood, depending on the area, there are a few markets still, but it's one that is difficult. As far as scrappy hardwood, for example, on some of the lands that we've had over the years, and many of our clients have, because they chose not to reforest at the time they cut trees, and they just said, I don't have the money right now, and they waited 10 years, then they have a hardwood thicket that is very difficult to manage to start back in production. You either have to do some very major stuff to it to get it where you can plant pines. One of the things you can do is use a whole tree chipping operation to come and chip all of the hardwood, and they use it to make energy. And Gainesville Regional Utilities does purchase that kind of material to burn in boilers to generate steam and electricity. And the pulp mills used to do it as well. Some of them may still, but the pulp mills generate their own fuel wood at their site when they're debarking the trees and such as that. So there's not as much of a market there. There was more of a market. Right now, there's just not much. And so when you always are glad that Gainesville Regional Utilities needs some fuel wood when you've got a piece of property that needs to be chipped, because it's got a lot of brush on it that you can't do anything with. It's not big enough to make lumber. It's not big enough to do anything except for chip with the bark on and branches and such as that.
And then typically with that, you're not really making money off of it. It's kind of like an even trade. They're just taking.
Yeah, it's an even trade. In a lot of times, like we recently, we had with the hurricanes, we had on our land a tornado touched down, in addition to having 3 hurricanes come through Taylor County. So we had to pay a whole tree chipping operation to come in to get rid of our mess here, because it was so bad. It was a serious fire hazard around our home and on our land. You couldn't, it was mostly hardwood trees, some pines as well, because we were managing right around our house and our 50 acres around the house as a natural forest. And so we had to pay someone to come in and whole tree chip it to clean it up where we could get the fire hazard down. We still have a gorgeous forest, and we'll be managing it for natural regeneration. But but we had to pay somebody to come in, but it was still the best option we had available to us, and we were very thankful for that. But the markets are few and far between for it, so it's tough.
So we'll stick with native species real quick. The hardwood harvest for red oaks, possibly for they're thinking like barrels, or even maybe firewood, things like that.
Yeah, in some areas there might be a firewood market, and you can, a logger can go through and they can cut your pine and the hardwood, if it's upland hardwood, for example. And take some to the firewood market if you're close enough. And take some of it, could be, up in South Georgia, one of the facilities that was taking it has just shut down, but if you're close enough to a place that's using hardwood pulpwood at a pulp mill, you can haul it there. But the loggers you're dealing with, or if you use a forester locally, or your Florida Forest Service people might be able to tell you if there's a market in your area for that. But there's fewer markets for hardwood pulpwood than there are for pine pulpwood. I'll put it that way.
And then the next question is for the non-native species. Is there a market for bamboo or eucalyptus?
The answer is no. There's no market for it, except if you do poultry chipping to send it to the fuelwood market, but you're not going to get very much money for it at all.
Okay, well, that's the questions for that one.
Okay. All right. So in this case, if you plant your longleaf pine and you choose to manage for pine straw, then you can start potentially raking approximately 8 to 10 years old, and then you clear cut the timber when they're about 23 to 25-year-old, giving you a pulpwood market in your area. Otherwise, you may wait a little longer and let the trees get a little bigger for chip and saw or saw timber. But so that would be a scenario where you were growing for longleaf pines and pine straw. And I want to tell you, pine straw raking, we look at a stand to look at how much money is generated throughout the number of years that you are growing it. And because pine straw can be raked and income can begin at like age 8 or 10, it is, you could almost in today's dollars, when you discount the cash flows, you make just about as much on pine straw as you do timber when you cut in 23 to 25 years. So it is a very important financial consideration. If you have property that you can grow pine straw on and that there are people to rake it. Some counties don't have much of a raking market. So even if you grew it, if you don't have enough acreage to make it worth their while to come, you've done it for no good reason. So that's something you'd want to check with whoever's helping you reforest your land. Be sure you really have a pine straw market in your area, because it's not everywhere. If you in the region of Suwannee County, Florida, you know, where Live Oak is in that general region, there's a lot of good pine straw companies there, and that is part of what they do a lot in that county. And you got to keep your land very clean and keep the mowed under your trees and things like that, and then you'll have a market. But if you don't do those things, you don't keep it mowed and you keep the weeds out and things of that sort, you might not get somebody to come rake it. So there is ongoing management costs associated with getting your land ready for raking pine straw, and then making sure you get it raked every year so you can get that income. And that's where you might need some help to do that.
Yeah, and I would also suggest that if you're wanting to do pine straw, that you do it in an area that's already been disturbed, or if that you're wanting to have for wildlife goals. I mean, you are taking away some of those wildlife benefits if you're doing strictly pine straw. So you want to have a diverse area.
Right. Yep.
Allison's asking about the minimum number of acres for pine straw to be successful.
What I would tell you is most of the time, whether it's timber or pine straw, if you don't have at least 40 acres, you're probably not going to, it's going to be difficult to get somebody to come. You can at 20 acres, you know, but if you have just 10 acres, you're going to have a hard time getting it logged. You're going to have a hard time doing everything because it's not enough production for these loggers to come. And the reason I say that, their operations, they've got every piece of equipment's a couple $100,000 each, you know, and so they've got over $1 million in equipment for one crew, and they have to be able to get on a track and stay and produce as much as they can, as fast as they can, to keep the cash flow coming from them to pay their bills. So they will not hop around to a 10-acre parcels. Now, if your neighbor had 50 acres and you and them were going to sell your 10 acres at the same time, well, that's how you would get it done. But other than that, you won't get somebody to come cut it for 10 acres. So you really gotta, I would just say 40 acres is a minimum.
Yeah.
for
I'm gonna
any
do a
election. Mhm.
quick shameless plug here for the Florida Tree Farm program. They're having Outstanding Tree Farm of the Year tour on November 12th. And if you want to see a pine straw operation in the works, a gentleman's property that does integrate for wildlife, that'll be on November 12th in Suwannee County.
Good. And I recognize that we're running close on time, so I'm going to move quickly through some of these slides. This is what ground applied herbicide looks like. So this is a site that was clear cut, and you can see the tractor is running around and spraying. He's driving in straight rows back and forth. And this is how ground applied herbicide is used, how it's applied. This is what containerized longleaf seedlings look like. So you see they have dirt on the bottom. Most seedlings don't look like that. They don't have the dirt on it. They're more expensive to do containerized seedlings. You can buy those in loblolly and slash as well with the dirt on them. The survival rate at time of planting is better, but they all also are more expensive. So longleaf, you don't see a stem. What you see is the grass. It looks like grass that it'll look like that for several years before it comes out of the grass stage. This is what a pine straw operation would look like, where it's been mowed, it's sprayed for herbicide every couple with Roundup every couple years, and the weeds are kept down where the rakers can come in and have just pure pine straw. This happens to be slash pine. It's not longleaf, but this was in an area in Pasco County where they had a market for slash pine. Okay. So let me move on quickly. And if we need to stop at any time and just sort of close out the meeting, we can. It's not a problem. If you also had, scenario has 150 acres of site prep land, and you know, pulpwood markets are a long way away, and you want to manage for quail and generate some income on it, and you have sandy uplands. So you'd use that appropriate herbicide, and you would plant fewer longleaf trees per acre. So in this case, we recommended 500. And the reason we do that is you're going to start prescribed burning. And while longleaf pine are fire tolerant, they aren't like, you know, they still can be killed. You still can kill them by getting the fire too hot or burning at a wrong time of the year. So, but you would then start burning a burning regime every 2 to 3 years to manage for quail. And so because you don't maybe have a pulpwood market available, you just keep doing that to your rotation about 20 years, 20 to 30 years. You start looking for a market to either thin your timber or do a final harvest about 30 years. So that would be the scenario if you were to do this on longleaf and you were just growing to do for quail, for example. And you might even plant less than 500, but what our experience is when you get active with your burning, you're going to lose some every year. And plus there's natural, your trees about 3 or 4% per year to die naturally along
Mortality.
Yeah, mortality. So I want to show you a couple more slides here. This is how you also can herbicide. This is aerial herbicide, and you can see the boom on a helicopter that if you have large acreages, for example, say you have a very sandy soils and you don't have any swamps around, or you have large acres that you could spray without having to deal with getting around, you know, sensitive areas, you can use this aerial herbicide applicators. They actually land on this truck. The rotors are still going, it's still going, and the guys come out and it's just like a fuel tank, and they pump the more herbicide in it, and then it flies off and sprays. And it is cheaper per acre, but you got to have the right site for it. But I just wanted you to be aware that there is such a thing that can be done on private land. This is what
Michelle, we're doing fine on time, so don't feel like you need to rush.
Okay. So this is what longleaf pine looks like in the grass stage. And when you plant longleaf pine, it will not grow high, really tall for the first, say, 5-6 years. Other pine trees will be already 3 foot a year. So it's 6 years old. A slash pine, you know, might be 20 feet tall, where it's just a longleaf might be 6 feet tall coming out of the grass stage. But longleaf pine puts their root system down deep before they really start growing up. But this is what longleaf pine looks like while it's still in the grass stage, in case you've never seen a longleaf pine. but their needles are much longer, probably twice the length as a slash pine. And again, you'd be stringing your fire, you'd use your fire. So hypothetical on track number 4, this would be if you had 250 acres, for example, of site prep land and your goals, and this time we want to talk about soils and hydrology. That's a very important factor when you're considering what species to plant on the site. So in this case, we're saying that our land is a wet flatwood site and it requires bedding so the trees don't die to do too much water. Some of the land, when you cut all the trees off of it, the water table is so close to the surface without the trees sucking it up and using it, you'll have standing water in a lot of places. And so you actually have to bring in a bedding plow. They actually throw dirt up in a pile. And they have these rows of piled up dirt that you plant your trees on top of. And and those are, you know, basically they've got something under the ground that's holding that water close to the surface. And so in this case, this scenario, we want to produce some salt pulpwood, but mostly chip and saw. So again, we start out with appropriate herbicide. And loblolly pine grows very well on sites with clay in the subsoil. So if you have really clay soils or clay in the subsoil, loblolly might be the species you want to plant. You can't rake pine straw. There's no market for the needles. Loblolly is too short. But it is the fastest growing pine. Now they've done a lot of genetic breeding and that kind of thing, where loblolly now is the fastest growing pine in the choice of slash, loblolly, or longleaf. And you can use bare root or containerized seedlings. And then seedlings need to be rust resistant. That means resistant to this disease that can make the stem weak and break off. And so those are the kind of things you want to consider. And you'd probably plant 650 to 700 seedlings. If you wanted to grow mostly pulpwood and thin at age 15 and clear cut at 25, or if you really want to try to grow more chip and saw, you might back off to 500 seedlings per acre, and thin at age 16, clear cut at 25. So it really does depend on what your goals are. You want to try to maximize your income. Do you want to have it spaced, the seedlings spaced further apart where you can do more wildlife habitat enhancements and burn and things like that? So it really does depend what your goals are of how you would manage your property. And this is what bare root seedlings look like. The others you noticed, I told you they had dirt on it. And those were longleaf. These are slash and loblolly, and these are bare root seedlings, and that's what they look like coming from the nursery. And you can't, like when you're planting these trees, you can't just open up the whole bundle and let the air get to those roots because it'll dry them out. So you got to be protective of them until they get in the ground. And then in nature's way, I mean, you will have some mortality in the first year. We typically, when we plant usually late December through the end of February. And then in September, we go back and we do a seedling survival count to see if we have enough surviving trees. Because if there's been a drought that year or dry spring at a certain time, and your soils are very dry to begin with, you may have some mortality that gets you below an acceptable stocking level for your goals. And that first year you can interplant and go back and plant in between where they've died. But after that, the other trees are too high and they will shade it out. So if you have to do any supplemental planting, you have to do it at the end of the first planting season, you know, at the end of that summer, if you want to have a chance of filling in any kind of seedlings, you know, and for your long term. And if you don't have at least 400 seedlings per acre survive the first year, you're probably not going to have a really, you're not going to maximize your income on your property, just from pine production. And this is what a mechanical tree planter looks like if you've never seen one. So what this is a person sits on the back and they put the seedlings in these little metal boxes to the right and left. And this is a machine that has these little arms that the person on the back will actually place those seedlings in this little hand, and it will turn and put that seedling in the ground. And so what there's a knife here in the middle that'll split that down the middle, the row down the middle. It'll place that seedling, and then there are two wheels right here that are angled that pinch the dirt around the roots. So this is a machine planter. It doesn't mean it's all mechanical. It's, there's a person feeding that planter, but that's what a machine planter looks like. And you get very good survival with it. So anyway, I just want to be sure you'd had an opportunity to see what a planter looks like. There are different types, but this is a typical machine planter that you would see nowadays. And we're very fortunate because with Florida's flat land, you can do mostly machine planting. You do have hand planters that we use on some sites that are just like some sites, there's too much debris left and you don't want to spend the money on raking it or whatever. You can bring in hand planters to plant your trees. The difference is there's not quite as high a survival rate. The rows might not be as straight, like if you wanted to be able to run a tractor down the middle, sometimes they get a little narrow on the rows, but that's all can be controlled in the field when it's being planted. And then I wanted to show you another way to string fire. It's probably not something you're going to use on your property unless you're an extremely large landowner, but the state hired the Forestry Company a number of years ago to do a helicopter burn on a 3,000 acre parcel that they were doing bear habitat improvement on. And you can actually, and the reason this is helpful is some of these are swamps that you cannot get equipment through, and a person to walk through a 3,000 acre swamp is not practical when you're stringing fire because it's not safe. You can't get away quick enough. And there aren't any roads maybe in the interior. So that's where comes in very handy, where they're actually shooting out this beam here like a napalm to start a fire. And then the great thing about it is that helicopter can go find areas that burned out too quick, and then they've got internal areas to the block that need to be burned out. He can just fly right over and continue to put some napalm out basically and burn it out. So there is a use for it. It's not very often that you see this happen, but there are applications, and I just wanted the landowners to know that such a thing is available and can be done. Okay. Any other questions?
Nobody's typing anything in the chat, but if somebody just wants to speak up, feel free. We've got another 20 minutes.
Okay, there's a new one.
Oh, how do we find out more information? That's from Miss Ann.
More information about any of this. Certainly I'm putting this up on the screen now. The Forestry Company is who I work for. My husband is the owner of the company, and he worked with Procter & Gamble initially when I was hired with P&G. We both were working for them as young foresters. He was also assistant director of the Florida Forest Service many years ago. So he's got a lot of experience with state land management and as well as private land management for our clients. And so you can certainly call either of us, and the best way to call it, just call us on our cell phones that we have here or email us, and we'll be glad to get back with you. Now your county foresters are really, really good place to go to for help, as well as people like Chris Demers with the university and any of the contacts you've got, or you can Ginger and Allison have a lot of contacts as well that they can put you in touch with, but feel free to call any of us. We'll be glad to talk about options and more information you might need.
Okay, Mac is asking us if it's necessary to bed pines in the northern part of the strait where there's deeper soils.
It all depends on how close the water is to the surface. There are counties, and for example, Taylor County, a lot of the land here has to be bedded because it's a flatwood site. It's a wet flatwood sites, but my land particularly, we're on a little hill, so we don't have to bed it. And then along further down towards Steenhead, Keaton Beach, it's sandhills down there, so it doesn't have to be bedded. So it does depend on your particular site. If it's a wet site, yeah, probably has to be bedded. But if it's not, you know, there are pockets all around that are dry enough. And even on your own, you know, say you might have a couple 100 acres, part of it might need to be bedded and part of it might not. It is quite variable.
And then when you're thinking about the bedding, then you're also looking at your disturbance to the ground and if you're what kind of herbaceous cover you're wanting to come back. So that's all where you're trying to figure out your goals and what is your property.
Yeah.
Alice is asking, how far south does Florida longleaf pine grow?
How far south in Florida does pine grow?
Longleaf pine.
Oh, longleaf pine. Oh, longleaf pine grows, you know, all the way south. You know, and actually in South Florida, there's a unique species, and I say it's a South Florida slash pine actually, but so yeah, longleaf pine is got a wide range of in Florida up into central Georgia, or actually I can't pull it up real quick, but
yeah,
just type in the internet and just put longleaf pine range. It's quite large. So you can, you know, Alabama, Georgia, longleaf pine will grow a lot of places. But the further north you go, when you have a lot of ice storms, that's where you get problems with growing longleaf. But in Florida, there's just no problem.
Anne's asking about the advice for picking great land managers and the top quality logging company. I'm just going to think that you're going to talk about a master logger.
Okay. So most of the logging companies have somebody on their crew that has gone through the master logger training, because the industry has acknowledged that it's important for the logging crews to understand how to log correctly and take care of the environment. And I'm very proud to say that, you know, for many, many years now, for over 20 years, the industry has had a very, very high percentage of compliance with best management practices in the logging woods. And that part of that is because they do have people trained to know how to treat the wetlands and how not to do things not to do. Like, you don't want to be, you know, that there are guidelines that the loggers should follow and that landowners should follow, called best management practices. Now, it is not a law, but we all recognize that we need to self-manage so we don't have the government managing for us. So the industry as a whole has embraced implementing best management practices so that if we have to bed, for example, we don't bed in a way that would cause erosion. So that would be a consideration in the direction your beds go, for example, if you have hilly property. For example, you don't push logging debris into a wetland, for example. In years and years past, that's probably what was done. They just push it all into the swamp, you know, but that's not an accepted practice any longer. So it's important that when you choose a logger that they will follow best management practices. And on the website, the state has websites and your county foresters can get you hard copies or get you the link to find those best management practices. And like, for example, if you have a pond or a sinkhole or an intermittent stream or a regular stream that never dries up, there are guidelines to show how close should you get to that, how far away should you stay, how much of the wood can you harvest in a buffer zone and things of that sort. So there are guidelines, and that's your county foresters can help you with all those kinds of things, I think.
Yeah, and Pilates also put it in the chat. She's provided a link to FDACS, the water quality best management practices for silviculture.
Yeah.
And I just also want to add that there's also a slew of other best management practices for all kind of industries within Florida, whether it's blueberries or cattle or, you know, dairy, anything like that. Also diversity for small farms. And there's also wildlife best management practices for both forestry and for agriculture.
Absolutely. And the best management practices for wildlife, for forestry, we also embrace those. And that's so that you are not caving in a gopher tortoise burrow, or you're not doing something that would cause there be a problem with an eagle that has a nest. You know, you don't want to, you want to promote those kinds of animals and things like that and protect them on your property. And so, it's important, you know, to know that those things exist. And it's good to look at those and know them for yourself. And they have, the classes are not real long or anything, but it's enlightening, to help you know how to protect your property and the wildlife on your property.
Right. Those are the guidelines to reduce the impacts that you might have for doing it. But the one thing to notice is that you do have to sign a notice of intent for those. And that once you sign those, then if you follow those guidelines, as they'll serve as assurances, so that if something did happen, then it provides you some protection on that.
Yes, it does. Like, and the notice of intent is to say, I'm notifying the government that I intend to follow best management practices to try to protect the environment. And that's what she's saying is, when you do that, when you've taken one of these classes and your intent is not to cave in a gopher tortoise hole in tune one or something like that, then if that's your intent, you've taken the class and you know how to do it. If it accidentally occurs because somebody didn't see a gopher tortoise hole, for example, then there's protection.
There's assurances.
Yeah, protection for you as a landowner legally.
Yeah. So it's awesome. And it also helps, just like Michelle was saying about, you know, as far as government regulations, things like that. We were able to use the wildlife best management practices to show, hey, our private landowners in Florida are doing a great job protecting gopher tortoises, you know, especially when they're being considered for a candidate for federal listing.
Right.
There is another question here about blackberries. There's blackberry bushes growing in a slash pine stand that's 5 years old. Should they use herbicide or cut them?
Well, the question is, you want to pick them ongoing? Now, the only reason, I mean, seriously, they're not a problem unless you want to harvest pine straw. Pine straw, people, you know, when they're buying the straw, they don't want to have stickers in it and they, you know, that kind of thing. So, most of the time it's not an issue, unless you are going to rake pine straw. Or if you
So
don't,
that next question is for
you could
you.
burn it, you know, you could burn under them or something like that if you want to try to control them or something like that. But again, if you rake in pine straw, that's mainly the only time that I know of people would go through and mow them and spray.
So Ginger, the next question is for you. How do you tell the difference between a gopher hole and an armadillo hole?
Armadillo hole. Basically, you're looking at the structure, at the flatness of the bottom of the structure. If it's a complete circle, it's an armadillo hole. If there's a flatness, kind of like a semicircle, then it's more apt to be a gopher hole. Typically, the gopher holes will have what they call an apron, a sandy area in the front of that dug burrow. And then also, sometimes in the armadillo holes, you'll see a line, which is actually the armadillo's tail drag being done through the sand. Once you start looking at them, you'll really be able to tell the difference. But the big difference is the shape of the burrow. And I know Mac's on here. If she has anything else to add, she's more than welcome to jump in. Half moon shape. Yep, the burrow hole. There she is. That's Mac's job, is gopher tortoises. So.
She did a great presentation for us one at our annual meeting.
Paulette's mentioning that mowing the blackberry drives the root systems to expand. So almost like root sprouts on a tree.
Yeah.
When you're mowing it, those roots are saying, "Hey, we need to grow some more." And and saying, I was told that a gopher tortoise hole matches the shape of the tortoise shell. That's very true. So it's really neat fact that width of that burrow is the same as the length of the tortoise. So you can tell the size of the tortoise based on the width of the burrow, because that tortoise needs to be able to turn around in it, and they actually block it. It's their defense mechanism. They'll actually block that hole. So that's pretty neat. If you measure from the right front foot to the left front foot across, that's also the same as their width, because they got to be able to dig their burrow. It's pretty neat the way that tortoises are laid out anatomically. I'm just saying. What did I miss? Any questions? Somebody said very awesome. That was Anne. And somebody's asked about this document, if we can provide it, if it's available. And I will say too that we have recorded this, so it will be available. Paulette will work on that for us. The most difficult gopher tortoise holes to locate are the small ones. Yes. I had a biologist that used to call those little baby tortoises walking ravioli because those little guys just scoot along. When doing a Google search, it says longleaf only grows in North Florida. That's not correct. It's all throughout the Southeast. I was looking for the southernmost forest of longleaf in Florida. It'll expand further south for sure.
Well, good. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for presenting today. It has been a great presentation. I know that people will
Michelle,
have
thank you.
really enjoyed it.
Mhm.
So, for our people who have been on with us, we will send you a survey so that we can see how, if you enjoyed the presentation and other presentations that you would like to see. So expect an email with a quick survey. And thank you all for attending. I just want to remind you about going to our website, fwla.net, so that you can see more of our events that are happening, as well as join and become part of our mission of spreading information across. So thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Thank you.